Record. Welcome to the Institute of Jewish Knowledge and a very special program tonight. And for this occasion, Rabbi Akiva, please do us the privilege of introducing Dr. Sandra Lilienthal.
My pleasure, Kim. Good evening, everyone. You look fantastic out there. Friends, it's truly a high honor and a privilege to introduce Dr. Sandra Lilienthal to address our gorgeous IJKL community prior to these days of awesomeness. I instead of days of awe, I like days of awesomeness. Friends, you're all familiar with the Talmudic expression, Ein Mayim Ela Torah, which basically means that wisdom and water are in Torah lingo synonymous to each other. That all the qualities of enlightenment and wisdom are directly comparable to all the qualities of life-sustaining water. Everything about Torah and everything about water are equal to each other. And there is, friends, no better embodiment of this Talmudic insight. There is no better personification of this insight than our dear teacher and guide and friend, Dr. Sandra Lilienthal. Friends, Sandra's wisdom in Torah and Jewish thought in general is pure, is clear, is transparent and flowing like water from a fresh brook. Her deep spiritual teachings and moral guidances nurture our hearts and our minds and our soul, just like water that sustains and satisfies all of life. For those of us who have learnt with and from Sandra, we can attest that we have taken the 7-Eleven big gulp. We have taken the Starbucks venti, because nobody leaves her lectures and her teachings without feeling intellectually nourished and spiritually refreshed and humanly recharged. That is the truth. So it is no wonder that Sandra is sought after by a multiplicity of diverse Jewish organizations worldwide, and that we at IJKL have been so privileged to call her Mora, our teacher, Manhiga, our guide, and Chaveira, our friend. So friends, with a deep sense of nachas and a deep sense of gratitude, I give you Dr. Sandra.
Oh, wow. And what do I do after Rabbi Akiva has introduced me in this way? Thank you so much, Rabbi, for your extremely kind and generous words. Good evening, everyone. I'm so grateful to all of you for being here tonight. Thank you, Kim and Rabbi Akiva, for the amazing work that you have been doing at the Institute for Jewish Knowledge and Learning, and for inviting me to share some words. It's a pleasure and an honor to be speaking with you, as we are 24, 25 hours away from a new year and a new beginning. There's also a challenge involved, and I want to share with all of you a backstory, which fits in very well with the message I want to give today. When Kim called me to invite me to speak tonight, I was actually sitting in Jerusalem, visiting my children and grandson. Life there was back to normal. We all had been vaccinated. We were feeling that things were about to change. Nobody was wearing a mask. And we knew that with God's help, we would go back to normal life. So Kim and I spoke about the topics for tonight and decided that I should address the blessings and the difficulties of going back to the life we had been used to before and had actually to reacquaint ourselves with now. For some, going back to human interaction was a source of anxiety after really being in a small bubble for so long. And as I began to reflect on the topic, I realized that some things had forever changed and that we would enter a new normal, not the old normal. COVID actually taught us several lessons. We will not be going back to jobs that are not fulfilling. We know that hours of daily commute can be avoided. We know it is not necessary to travel cross country for a meeting. We actually have become closer to our families, and we want more meaning in life. The fragility of life has been thrown in our faces in such a way that we really have to reinvent ourselves and reinvent community and communal bonds. I understand Rabbi Akiva calls these collateral blessings, which is a beautiful term and a very profound way to look at it. It's not that we are happy COVID happened. It's not that we not have suffered tremendously, whether physically or emotionally in the last 18 months. But with all that happened, which we truly wish had not happened, we have learned a lot. And that in and of itself is a blessing. And so I began to jot down some ideas. Kim and I came up with a beautiful title for the address, and we were both feeling very accomplished. And then, numbers started going up again. I bought more masks. I began avoiding public spaces once again. The exact opposite of what we had envisioned would happen was actually happening. The light at the end of the tunnel proved to be just a mirage. The tunnel was still there, but somehow somebody apparently had turned off that light. And so I called Kim in a slight despair and said, Kim, we have to go back to square zero. I can't talk about going back to normal life because we're actually moving in the other direction. We're now looking at more of the same for who knows how long. And so, with real life reminding me that despite our most careful planning, the road of life is unpredictable, I was thrown back to the Yiddish saying, man tracht und Gott lacht. Man plans and God laughs. And here we are tonight with a very different address than the one I had planned to and wished to deliver. I won't even tell you what happened in the last hour with me being with no power and the computer not turning off when the power came back. And so everything is in God's hands and we just have to go with the flow. So before I jump to the topic proper, I need to make one little comment. As you know, Jewish educators many times share ideas that are not uniquely theirs. And as the Mishnah teaches us the importance of Omer Davar B'Shem Omro, saying things in the name of the one who said it, I want to let you know that besides my own thoughts, I owe some of tonight's insights to Dr. Erica Brown and to Rabbi J.J. Schachter, from whom I learned this year. In times when what we expect can change almost overnight, we feel that there is no stability and no grounding. Everything seems to be partially up in the air. And while this might be heaven for those who walk on tightropes, it is certainly overwhelming and anxiety-provoking for most of us. What I want you to come away with tonight is that Judaism is the grounding. Judaism helps us navigate the difficult times through teachings that are thousands of years old and yet profoundly modern in their application. If we were to list some of the phrases that we are going to repeat over and over and over again during this high holy day season, one of them would be Hashkivenu Hashem Elecha V'Nashuva Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. Take us back, O Lord, to yourself, and let us come back. Renew our days as of old, which is a verse taken from the book of IJKL, Lamentations. It seems we are saying to God, please make our days be like the old ones. Now, if we think about it, all of us have said many times in our lives that we miss the good old days. And now, besides our personal nostalgia, there is a collective missing of the good old days, defined as the days before February of 2020. But have we ever asked ourselves, what good old days do we really want to go back to? As I mentioned a minute ago, Jewish teachings, Jewish wisdom has a lot to offer, always, which is why it becomes our grounding. So this exact question that I just asked, what good old days do we want to go back to, was asked by our rabbis. The Midrash on the Book of Lamentations, Eicha Rabbah, asks exactly this question. What does the verse in Lamentations mean when it says, Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem, renew our days, return to the old days? Which days? What is it referring to? This was written, the book of Eicha was written after the destruction of the temple. So are we talking about the days before the destruction of the temple? That would be the logic answer. But the rabbis rarely give logic answers. So in typical rabbinic fashion, the Midrash looks for a place in the Torah where the word kedem, because we say kekedem, as in the old days, that the word kedem is first mentioned. And it mentions, the first kedem is from Adam. And it's way back in chapter 3 of Bereshit, of the book of Genesis, verse 24, where it says that God drove the man out and stationed him east of the Garden of Eden. Vayashken mikedem legan Eden. So the rabbis say, well, if we look at that word, kedem, there, it is not that we want to go back to the days before the destruction of the temple. What we want is we want to go back to the days of Adam. But here's the interesting thing. It would all be great if it weren't for the fact that there is a mistake in what the rabbis are pointing out. And that is that this is not the first mention of the word kedem in Tanakh, in the Torah. Actually, the first time it is mentioned, it also relates to Adam, but it is a chapter earlier. So if we go back to the days of Adam, why are we not asking to go to the first kedem of Adam, which would be much more interesting because chapter 2, verse 8 says, the Lord planted a garden in Eden in the east and placed there the man that God had formed. So, Va'ita Hashem Elokim bet Gan Eden mikedem, right? So there's a profound reason why the rabbis did not use this verse. It's not that they forgot about it. It's not that they did not know. What could possibly be the reason? Why would the rabbis say that we want to go back to a time when we were outside of the Garden of Eden, instead of saying we want to go back to the first kedem? And the answer is really profound. When we think about the days that we want to go back to, we can't want the good old days of the first kedem because that was the Garden of Eden. That was paradise, which will not happen. It is simply unrealistic to imagine going back to the times of the Garden of Eden. So it is the second kedem that we look for. We know what we can pray for and what is not at all possible. When we live in challenging times, we wish to be transported to the perfect place, which is utterly impossible. Once we realize that and accept that the perfect world is not possible, we have the tendency to turn back to a past that is imagined in our dreams, a past that truthfully never existed outside of our wishful thinking or our extremely creative imagination. Because the known, even if it's only an imagined known, is always more comfortable than a new day. If you think of it, as soon as the Israelites achieved freedom on the other side of the Sea of Reeds, they want to return to Egypt. Egypt was the known, which in many ways, as bad as it may have been, was more comfortable to them than the unknown of the desert. Yet, we know what happens to those who can't move forward and insist on looking back. They become, figuratively, like Lot's wife, a pillar of salt stuck in place. We looked at the origin and one possible meaning of the word kedem. But because Judaism has all these many layers of interpretation for almost anything, I want to bring in another idea, and that is that the word kedem can also be related to kadima, which means onward, progress, to move forward. We cannot be stuck in the past, or worse yet, in an imagined past that never was. We need to move forward into a time of renewal, of progress. I understand some of our fears. I have them too. But I bet Abraham was also fearful of leaving the known for the unknown, as were 10 of the 12 spies, as was David, and so many other biblical characters. Routine is comfortable and comforting, but it is in the transitions that we can actually grow. Our ancestors may have been scared of the unknown, and yet, despite their fears, they journeyed. We too have the strength to do so. And so we ask God to renew our days as of old, to journey with us, to guide us and embrace us, just like God did to our ancestors. We ask God to bring us back to some normal, less shaky way of life. When COVID is over, though, we will not go back to perfection. And you know why? Because it was never perfect. We will, we hope and pray, go back to imperfection. It is very important that we keep that in mind. The world was not perfect before COVID, just as the Egypt imagined by the Israelites in the desert, complaining about having to eat manna, was not real. The Israelites said to Moses, "We remember the fish that we used to eat free in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic." Really? Fish, cucumbers, melon, leeks, onions, and garlic? Are they talking about being enslaved in Egypt, or are they talking about eating breakfast at an Israeli hotel? We must be prepared to hold a realistic understanding of what it is that we want to go back to. It was not perfect then, and it will not be perfect when we come out of this crisis. What we are hoping for, praying for, is that we are able to return to the imperfect good old days. And this we all need to keep in mind if we are to approach life based on reality and not on dreams and fantasies. We could stop here and call it a day. Message given. Move forward with a realistic view of what we should expect and what we will encounter. But the renewal which we hope for in this season of holy days is not just the renewal of days, of something outside of us. It is, maybe most importantly, a renewal inside of ourselves, a personal renewal. Throughout the past year, we have made many mistakes. Do you know why we made so many mistakes? That happened because we, all of us, have the God-given freedom to make mistakes. Yet, the same God who gave us the freedom to err, gave us the freedom to change and to repair our relationships with God, with others, and with ourselves. I am quoting Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks here, which was one of the greatest losses of this past year. In an article written in September of 2017 for the Wall Street Journal, Rabbi Sacks said, quote, "The sociologist Philip Rieff pointed out that the movement from paganism to monotheism was a transition from fate to faith. By this, he meant that in the world of myth, people were pitted against powerful, capricious forces personified as gods who were at best indifferent, at worst hostile to humankind. All you could do was try to win them over, battle or outwit them. This was a culture of character and fate, and its noblest expression was the literature of Greek tragedy. Jews came to see the world in a completely different way. The book of Genesis opens with God making humans in God's image and likeness. This phrase has become so familiar to us that we forget how paradoxical it is, since for the Hebrew Bible, God has no image and likeness. As the narrative quickly makes clear, what humans have in common with God is freedom and moral responsibility. The Jewish drama is less about character and fate than about will and choice. To the monotheistic mind, the real battles are not out there against external forces of darkness, but in here, between the bad and better angels of our nature. End quote. And so, just as God called out to Adam, Ayeka, where are you? God calls out to us all the time, and most especially this time of the year. Ayeka, where are you? Not geographically. Where are you standing? Where are you on your journey? Hiding from God is a pretty silly idea, as we know, and as the Haftarah of Yom Kippur, when we read Jonah, reminds us every single year. But perhaps sillier than that is hiding our answer to this question from ourselves. Because we must know where we are in our journeys if we are to work on becoming better, if we are to make changes in our lives. From a Jewish perspective, this introspection and work on becoming better is so fundamentally important that it literally takes up a quarter of our year. From Pesach to Shavuot, we go through the counting of the Omer, in which we spend 49 days looking into ourselves, working on our character traits, trying to improve. And then we spend another 40 days, the full month of Elul, plus the first days of the month of Tishrei up to Yom Kippur, reflecting on how we can become better. And maybe because 89 days might not be quite enough, our rabbis added that truthfully, this process can continue going on for another few days until Hoshana Rabbah, the last day of Sukkot. Adding all of that up, we are expected to focus on working on ourselves for about 100 days every year. And do you know why? Because for Judaism, growth can only happen if one takes personal responsibility for it. It will not be given to us. It will not be handed. It will not happen unless we actually take the responsibility to improve, to grow, and to change. In the Talmud, in Tractate Rosh Hashanah 16b, we are told that Mishaneh Makom, Mishaneh Mazal, changing where you are changes your luck. Now, changing where you are is not just about physical location, as much as Ayeka did not refer to a geographical place. Changing where we are is about changing ourselves so that we can enjoy a better life. It is not a magical potion. It is hard work, very hard work, that can lead to the results we would like to achieve. Changes only happen if there is a daily commitment. You can read articles, you can read books about change, about self-improvement, but reading does not change you. There's a significant difference between reading or learning and doing. What accomplishes change is the integration of reading and life. Learning has to be internalized first, and then it needs to be externalized and translated into actions. Every Saturday morning in the Amidah, we read, Sabeinu mituvecha, samcheinu nafsheinu b'shuatecha, v'taher libeinu leovdecha be'emet. Satisfy us with your goodness, gladden our souls with your salvation, and purify our heart to serve you with truth. Being given this opportunity to purify our hearts, which we believe are part of a soul that is pure. And we thank God for a pure soul, just like David did in Psalms. Given that this opportunity to get rid of the gunk that little by little is added to us by the harshness of life is not something we should take lightly. Being able to revisit our relationships with others, with God, and with ourselves is a true treasure. It is not only the world that is constantly changing. It is that we too are capable of constant change, and hopefully for the better, allowing us to have a better tomorrow. But that, my friends, requires hard work. What makes the difference, what allows us to be successful in effecting this change, is the daily work that we put into this process. My colleague and teacher, Dr. Erica Brown, said this week, life is in the transitions, in the life quakes. And I just loved the term life quakes. Things happen. We encounter bumps and quakes throughout life. These transitional experiences, whether on a macro level such as COVID or on a personal level, change us. And because of them, life gives us unending homework. Are we able to move forward? It is fundamentally important to remember that although each person must work on their own selves, which can seem like a very lonely journey, God is with and in us wherever we go. Change is difficult, many times even unwanted. We all know how the Israelites were afraid to go into the land of Israel after being taken care of for 40 years in the desert. And yet, God said to Joshua in Deuteronomy, in actually this week's Torah portion, Chazak ve'ematz ki ata tavi et bnei Yisrael el haaretz asher nishbati lahem v'anochi ihyeh imcha. So be strong and resolute. Do not be terrified or dismayed, for God is with you. If we understand God's message at a deeper level, each of us will know that God is with us at every step of the way, wherever we are in our personal and communal journeys, in the good times and in the bad times. This brings us a sense of comfort, of support, of hope that we may very well stumble, and we do, but we will get there eventually. Now, without in any way minimizing God's help, guidance, and support in the process, I want to bring in another Jewish teaching that I consider to be extremely relevant for us at this time of uncertainty. In Melachim Bet, in the second book of Kings, there is a story told in chapter 4. A certain woman comes to the prophet Elisha crying. She tells him that her husband has passed away and that he owed a considerable amount of money, and that the creditor is coming to seize her 2 children as slaves. Elisha says to her, Higidi li, ma yesh lach babayit? Tell me, what have you in the house? To which she answers, I have nothing, just a tiny little bit of oil. Elisha then sends her to her neighbors, where she should ask for empty vessels, as jugs, as many as they have. She should bring all those vessels back to her house and start pouring the little bit of oil that she has into them. The woman does as the prophet told her to and begins pouring the little oil into all of those vessels. And miraculously, this oil is going on and on and on and on. And she fills one vessel and a second vessel and a third vessel until there are literally no more empty vessels left in the entire town. At this point, she comes back to Elisha and Elisha says to her, "Go now, sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your children can live on the rest." So one can focus on the miracle aspect of this story. And yes, as you can see, the Hanukkah oil miracle was not the first oil miracle in Jewish history. But I was taught another way to read this story, which I think is really important. When the woman first came to the prophet, he did not ask her if she had something at home. He asked her what she had. He knew that she had something. She had what would be needed. However, she did not yet know. So he makes her figure it out. All of us had to deal with losses in the last 2 years, terrible losses. We feel overwhelmed, but we, as the anonymous woman in the story, have what will be necessary to rebuild. We need to have the confidence that we have what it takes to navigate the storm. What do you have? A spouse, children, meaningful work, health, friends. We all have our little jugs of oil that will help us move forward in our journey, not in spite of what is going on in the world, but because of what is going on in the world. Sometimes these days of looking deep into ourselves, finding all the things we did and should not have done, and all the things we should have done and failed to do, leads us to a place of low self-esteem, even to some level of depression. I'm not good enough. Last year I said I would be better, and here I am again with the same flaws, saying I'm sorry to God for the exact same things I promised last year I would do differently. I'm a no one. I'm a complete failure. So here, Judaism again will ground our understanding, telling a God story that should help us reframe our thoughts. Most of us are familiar with the beginning of the Torah, in which the creation of the world is described. After creating day and night on day number 1, we are told, "Vayi erev vayi boker yom echad," and there was evening and there was morning, day 1. The famous Midrash Bereshit Rabbah asks a very logical question. Why Vayehi Erev, and there was evening? The Vav, the and, is connecting Erev, evening, to what? If there was nothing before, should it not have read there was evening and there was morning, with the morning connecting to the evening, but the evening having nothing to connect to? So the Midrash goes on to explain. And Rabbi Abahu said, this proves that the Holy One, blessed be he, went on creating worlds and destroying them until he created this one, and then declared, this one pleases me. Those did not please me. There are different interpretations of how many worlds were created and destroyed until our world came into being. But just so that you have an idea, these numbers vary from 974 to 1,000, which basically means God created over 970 worlds before and destroyed them and kept going until he got to ours, which is the one he was happy with. What the heck does that mean? You're telling me that God, the all-powerful, the all-knowing God, could not have created it right the first time? Why did God not get it right the first time? Rav answers, of course God could, but God messed up to teach us a powerful lesson. We too work to create worlds, our own little worlds, and sometimes they get destroyed. When that happens, many of us get depressed and give up. I invested so much energy in this relationship, in this business, in this life, and we just give up. The Midrash says, God also invested so much in creating worlds, and then those worlds were destroyed. So what did God do? God did it again and again and again and again. We all face challenges. Our worlds get compromised. Our dreams get shattered. But God modeled for us, even if it does not work out for 970 times, keep going, keep trying. Eventually, you will get to a place that looks like the one you wanted to get to. God started creating the world from a place of confidence and strength. We should read that message very, very carefully, as there too lies a lesson for us. If we undergo a spiritual inventory and we start from a place of deficiency, focusing on all of our deficits, we will not have the strength to do the hard work necessary for us to change. Change will come if we start from a place of abundance and happiness and the desire to want more of that abundance and happiness. Each of us needs to reframe. I'm not changed because I'm bad. I'm changing because I'm not yet good enough. Or to go from a place of joy. What am I doing right now that is really, really working? I want to do more of that. I want to bring in one more story tonight with a powerful teaching addressing the end of the High Holy Day season. Most of you have heard of Rav Kook. Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook was the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of the British Mandate in the land of Israel. His son, Tzvi Yehuda Kook, also became a famous rabbi. In the early years of the 20th century, Tzvi Yehuda, the son, went to learn in a yeshiva in Jerusalem, away from his home in Yafu. Rav Kook sent him a letter a few weeks into the year, inquiring how his son was doing. Now, what do you imagine the father, this big, important rabbi in Israel, wants to know about his son who has been sent to the most famous yeshiva of the times? And we would think most likely, tell me, what are you learning? How many volumes of Talmud have you opened? How are your grades? How is your Hebruta, your partner? Something like that. However, Rav Kook's letter asks literally, and I quote, I want to know everything about you. I'm very interested. I want to know when you lie down and when you wake up, what time and what do you eat for breakfast? And what time do you eat lunch? And what time do you eat supper? And what time do you go to sleep? And tell me, is your bed far from the window? Really? This is what Rav Kook wanted to know? What time you eat breakfast? And the answer is yes, because it is precisely in the mundane where the closeness of a relationship is most powerful. Rav Kook didn't need to know about the learning. The rabbis would take care of that. But as a father, he so cared about what his son was eating and if there was a breeze coming in through the window at night. Rav Kook cared about the mundane and the ordinary. And so at the end of Yom Kippur, after a period of intense spirituality, we encounter the holiday of Sukkot. Celebration of Sukkot is very different from the celebration of the two other pilgrimage festivals, Pesach and Shavuot. Pesach has so many miracles associated to it, the 10 plagues, the Exodus, the parting of the sea. And so does Shavuot, commemorating God's revelation to the Israelites amidst thunders that could be seen and lightning that could be heard. What are the miracles of Sukkot? That we were living in huts in the desert? Isn't that as ordinary and mundane as could be, especially when compared to the other two holidays, which seem so sublime, so elevated, so filled with the miraculous? After the intensity of the high holy days, God is saying to us, just like Rav Kook said to his son, I care about you, about the ordinary you. I am your spiritual parent. Go live in a hut where there are no miracles, where you are just you, because it is in the most basic of your human existence that I, God, am interested. And reversely, we know it is in the ordinary that we are able to appreciate the largesse of God's blessings. Take this thought with you into Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We will be at a very high spiritual level, but remember that God cares about every detail, not just the big things. God cares about what we eat and where we sleep. No concern is too shallow for God. Share with God where you are and what you need. Do not hold back. Throw your words and thought into the universe and let God hear them. And then listen to the echo, and you will hear yourself and find what you have that will allow you to get where you want to be. I'll conclude with a very practical suggestion that you can do to help you enter the high holy days tomorrow night. Take some time tonight or tomorrow during the day and write down the most important aspect of your life that you feel you need to work on right now. Not generalized, but very focused and very personal. Go into the holidays with that aspect that needs to be resolved in mind. Narrow down what you need to pray on. When you're dealing with 800 pages of prayers, is anybody counting? Have focus. There is one question that I need to answer this year, and I will focus my prayers on that. Bring that question to services with you. Write it on a Post-it note, put it in your machzor. Have the intentionality on it throughout the next days, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and the days in between. Do not bring a laundry list of what you need to change. By focusing on the one most important thing that is really important for you to work on, you have a much better chance to succeed. And remember to throw this out there and say to God, God, I need your help in achieving this. I'm going to do my part. I'm going to put my effort in, but I need your guidance. I need your support. I need your embrace. Remember that at this time of the year, we wish one another Shana Tova Umetuka. Have a good and sweet year. Why do we have to say good and sweet? And the truth is because some things are good, but aren't sweet. Going to the gym for some of us is a good example. And some things that are sweet are simply not good for us. We want a year where these two things come together. So with that, I wish all of you a Shana Tova Umetuka, a year that is both sweet and good, a year in which we are able to be better than we already are, a year in which we are realistic about where we want to be, a year in which we are able to strengthen our relationships with family, with friends, with God, and with our own selves. May each of us be inscribed and sealed for a year of plenty in all realms of life. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be so. We are opening up. If anybody has a thought, a quick question, a quick comment, please feel free. Raise your hand and we will get to you.
And also we can use the chat if you want to write it in. It's probably like cool. And we're on 2 pages, so it'll be important that we raise our hands.
Deborah Lesk, I think, has her hand up.
Actually, I was pointing out to Kim, we're on 3 pages.
Okay.
But since I'm speaking, I will say that this was a phenomenal talk. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you.
Absolutely relevant. Thank you.
I'm going to end the recording and then just add a comment.